Hey guys, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Breaking news from overnight. Fox News alert now. President Trump saying he's ready to cut a deal with Democrats. He says he will give protection to thousands of so-called dreamers if Democrats give him something in return, and that list includes the wall. President trying to tie that deal to sweeping immigration reform that has been elusive for decades. Good morning. I'm Bill Hemmer, live at America's News. Good morning.
Good Monday morning to you, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith. President Trump drawing up a 70-point plan on immigration. It includes building the border wall, hiring 10,000 additional ICE agents and 600 prosecutors, mandatory E-Verify, which confirms an immigrant's work eligibility, and a new points-based system for green cards. Democrats say the president isn't negotiating in good faith. Here's what Kellyanne Conway had to say on Fox and Friends this morning.
He's open to a deal, open to figuring out a way to have a broader immigration policy that certainly addresses DACA, the so-called Dreamer program, but along with all these other critical functions. So they should actually be calling their friends Chuck and Nancy.
Kristen Fisher is live now at the White House with more on this. Kristen, good morning.
Hey, Sandra, good morning. Well, for anyone who is worried that President Trump might be on the verge of backing off some of his core campaign promises, this should make them feel a lot better. What the White House sent over to Congress last night is a long list of demands of hardline immigration proposals. And at the very, very top of that list is full funding for the border wall. So what this does is essentially tie any Dreamer bill to the border wall, something that Chuck and Nancy had explicitly stated had been ruled out of their initial negotiations here at the White House with President Trump. So they put out a joint statement last night that reads in part, quote, "We told the president at our meeting that we were open to reasonable border security measures alongside the DREAM Act. But this list goes far beyond what is reasonable. The proposal fails to represent any attempt at compromise." But the White House already pushing back. Here's what Kellyanne Conway said just moments ago on Fox and Friends.
I'd like to know what Chuck Schumer thinks is reasonable. What's reasonable is to stop the flow of illegal immigrants and also of the drugs coming over the border.
So don't forget, the president and the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, they weren't just working on this Dreamers bill. They were also potentially discussing a new health care bill as well. So this throws another big wrench into both of those chances of bipartisanship. Sandra?
Kristen, so bring us up to speed on this spat between President Trump and Tennessee Senator Bob Corker.
Yeah, this has really gotten ugly very fast. And, you know, Corker and President Trump, they used to be friends. Corker at one point was even a serious contender for vice president, but things have really been brewing, tensions building for some time, and then they just boiled over yesterday morning when President Trump accused him of not having the guts to run for re-election. Here's the tweet that really started it all yesterday from President Trump. He said, "Senator Bob Corker begged me to endorse him for re-election in Tennessee. I said no when he dropped out, said he could not win without my endorsement." Corker had that. President Trump went on to say he also wanted to be Secretary of State. "I said no thanks." He is also largely responsible for the horrendous Iran deal. Well, about an hour later, Corker responded by saying, quote, "It's a shame the White House has become an adult daycare center." Someone obviously missed their shift this morning. Wow. So then, a few hours later, in an interview to the New York Times, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee accused the president of firing off reckless threats towards other countries that could set the nation on the path to World War III. He said, quote, "He concerns me and that the vast majority of our caucus understands what we're dealing with here." You know, just a stunning rebuke of a president from his own party. And don't forget, President Trump really needs Corker's vote if he has any hopes of getting meaningful tax reform passed. And what President Trump has said, what he wants, the largest tax cut in U.S. history. Sandra?
Already a busy week. Kristen Fisher, live at the White House. Thanks.
Senator Corker going even further in that New York Times interview, saying, quote, "It's like he's doing The Apprentice or something. He concerns me. It would have to concern anyone who cares about our nation." Wow. Stinging words here. Senior writer, Weekly Standard. John, good morning to you. Good morning. Here's another quote here on screen. "I know for a fact that every single day at the White House, it's a situation of trying to contain him." So I guess these two are not having lunch today, John, right?
Probably not. Probably not. I mean, it really just, calls into question why Bob Corker boosted President Trump or candidate Trump back in the primaries. If he thought that his recklessness could lead to something like World War III, I mean, I think President Trump's personality, his erratic behavior, that's been a known, that's been a factor priced in for a long time. So this does seem to be a bit of a squabble, a spat. It's not quite clear what he thinks he's going to accomplish. I'm not sure exactly how it helps people like the Chief of Staff or the Secretary of Defense to say that they're basically doing daycare duty for the president. If anything, that would seem to try and drive a wedge between the two of them. So not quite clear what Bob Corker hopes to accomplish. Not clear what Donald Trump hopes to accomplish.
He supported candidate Trump over Ted Cruz primary contest. The president responded this way: Bob Corker gave us the Iran deal, and that's about it. We need health care, we need tax cuts, reform, we need people that can get the job done. That leads you to a very interesting point. 52 Republicans in the Senate. Corker's there for another 14 months, John.
Yeah, I mean, the big vote, I mean, really the only chance for a big legislative victory is tax reform. And obviously it would be terrible for Bob Corker or any senator to not judge an issue based on the merits and to let some personal squabble decide his vote. But I mean, people have lots of motivations, and Corker had already expressed substantive concerns with a tax plan that raised the deficit. Trump going after him on Twitter is going to make it much more difficult for the White House to reach out and persuade him. I think that's just the way things are.
The way things are. Well stated, plainly. Look at immigration now. What do you make of the 70-point plan, and whether or not this has is this a deal on the table, or is this the beginning of negotiations, John?
I would think it would be his first offer. You know, it's the art of the deal. I mean, the president knows, he says he knows a thing or two about deals. So, you know, I don't know why exactly the wall or a fence has become so controversial. You know, you go back to 2006 and Democrat after Democrat voted for a border fence that never really got finished. But for some reason, because I think largely in part because the president made it such a centerpiece of his campaign, the Democrats aren't going to budge there. Now, will they give in on, you know, more border security? Something like that? You know, there's room for Trump to get at least something there.
Yeah, I think you're right
in exchange for
about
DACA.
that. And the 10,000 more border agents, you can probably cut a deal on that. But with regard to our cities, some of these Democrats are going to put up a fight on that. Last comment.
I think they will. You know, the party's more polarized. 10 years, I think Democrats would have struck a much more reasonable compromise. These days, I doubt it.
Thank you, John. John McCormick leading us off. Analysis on a Monday morning. Thank you, sir. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
Sandra.
Vice President Pence attending the Indianapolis Colts game yesterday, but he didn't stay long after noticing some of the San Francisco 49ers players during the national anthem. The vice president left the game after the anthem was over, tweeting this: "I left today's Colts game because the president and I will not dignify any event that disrespects our soldiers, our flag, or our national anthem." President Trump then took to Twitter to say this: "I asked Vice President Pence to leave stadium if any players kneeled, disrespecting our country. I'm proud of him and Second Lady Karen." Now, Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones has set a policy with his players: if you kneel, you don't play.
There is no equivocation here. We'll stand for the flag. If there's anything that is disrespectful to the flag, then we will not play.
This was Jones just 2 weeks ago on Monday Night Football, kneeling with his players, not during the anthem, but prior to it. We'll have more on the vice president's decision to leave that game later on in the show.
A few other factors in that, too, right? We were told this was on a schedule for some time, and they're retiring Peyton Manning's jersey. He's from Indiana. You can see why he would go a game like this. Flying from Las Vegas, you know, that was a late ad given the massacre of a week ago. Also, the 49ers, they're a team that kind of led the way on the whole kneel to begin with Colin Kaepernick. So we'll work our way through this and
quite a moment and
see
quite
what
a
happens
statement
from
being
there.
made by this White House.
Yeah. I think the league has kind of figured it out. You stand, you lock arms, and nobody sits down. And for the greater majority of NFL players this past weekend, that was the case. In the meantime, President Trump calling out North Korea, saying our current policy is wrong and, quote, the only thing will work. That was the comment, but what does that mean? Here's Mick Mulvaney on all that.
What the president is clearly telegraphing, this should not be news to anybody, is that military options are on the table with North Korea. They absolutely are.
What's coming next? Jillian Turner will answer that question in a moment next. Plus, there is this.
I did notice a note on the nightstand near his shooting platform, I could see on it he had written the distance, the elevation he was on, the drop of what his bullet was going to be for the crowd.
We're learning new details about that apparent note found inside the Las Vegas gunman's hotel room. We're going to be there live with the very latest. And
what an interview that was, too, right? Extreme weather across the country, wildfires raging in Napa Valley, Northern California, and people along the South Coast, Southeast Coast cleaning up after Hurricane Nate came ashore this weekend.
The wind was blowing real hard, and it came pushed the water straight on up, and then it was pushing the water we could see down into the bay.
New this morning reports the Trump administration will roll back power plant regulations imposed under President Obama. EPA head Scott Pruitt is reportedly planning to repeal the Clean Power Plan. The rules were put on hold by the Supreme Court back in February of 2016. Pruitt is expected to make the announcement with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell at an event in Kentucky today. Keep it right here on the Fox News Channel for updates.
One thing. How about on North Korea? What's the one thing that'll work with North Korea? Well, you'll figure that out pretty soon.
Well, President Trump leaving some intrigue on the table over how he plans to deal with North Korea in that comment from the weekend. Short time ago on Twitter saying this: our country has been unsuccessfully dealing with North Korea for 25 years, giving billions of dollars and getting nothing. Policy did not work. Jillian Turner, former White House national security staffer to Presidents Bush and Barack Obama, and a Fox News contributor now. And Jillian, good morning to you.
Morning, Bill.
What does it mean, calm before the storm? Let you know in time. Put it together for us. What do you think?
No one knows really exactly what the president means. What we can suss out is that he is trying to keep the credible threat of military force on the table in dealing with North Korea. He's doing everything he can at every available moment to allude to military plans that the Pentagon has in place, to allude to the fact he's willing to take advantage of them, to use them. Whether he actually is going to do that remains to be seen.
Indeed,
hopefully he's keeping it as a last resort option here.
Very interesting piece, Wall Street Journal this morning. Here's the headline for viewers. U.S. pressure on North Korea's global ties bears fruit. Campaign to close Pyongyang's embassies and curb its business activities worldwide has led more than 20 nations to restrict operations. It eventually leads us to a question as to whether or not you can exert enough pressure to get Kim Jong-un to change his behavior. But the details in the story are intriguing. A hostel in Berlin that was raising money to send back to North Korea was shut down. There were 20 ships flying the Fijian flag in the South Pacific that have now been found, and that business has been curtailed. The message is you can't go anywhere with us without us tracking you. The question then is, does that lead to a reversal of behavior on behalf of North Korea?
I think we're, as unfortunately, as President Obama said many times, in a period where we're focused on containment of the threat. Here is the reality, Bill, and it's not a pleasant reality. President Trump is right when he tweeted 25 years of putting pressure and negotiating and focusing on the diplomatic solution with North Korea has failed. However, the inverse of that is not automatically true, which is that having a military confrontation will get us where we want to be. Because keep in mind, when you enter into a military conflict with a nuclear-capable adversary, the ultimate outcome is some kind of nuclear war, which is not in the interest of anyone. So you can look at it as the last 25 years have failed, but you can also look at it as they have succeeded to the greatest degree possible, meaning we have avoided nuclear holocaust. That is a success.
So you chase the money operation of North Korea to every corner of the planet.
Exactly.
And you hope eventually that reverses behavior.
And you hope that it at least stymies rapidly increasing nuclear capabilities. Another option here, and this is something the Europeans are agitating for, led by Angela Merkel, is to have formal sit-down talks with the North Koreans. The French, the British, the Germans have been in President Trump's ear, pushing him to think about the U.S. to get on board for many weeks now. And it's something he alluded to starting during the UN General Assembly. He alluded to the idea that he would be open to it. This is another.
We've been at that table before, right? You saw
we have. I don't think he's going to do it, but that's another option.
We'll see if they lack the resources to run the program. That's the whole idea about chasing Fijian flags and chasing hostiles out of Berlin. Another question for you quickly when it turned to Iran, because we do expect a decision this week. Will he recertify or decertify the Iran nuclear deal, Jillian?
If I was placing bets today, I would say he's going to decertify. I think two main reasons here. He hates the optic of having to, every 90 days, recertify a deal that he doesn't stand behind. I think he is just itching to get away from it. He wants to drop this deal like a hot potato. The other reason that I don't think that he will recertify is because he believes he can get a better deal. So the only way to get a better deal is to scrap the first one and then build a new one.
No, we should know within days. I think it's this weekend when the deadline comes. Thank you, Jillian Turner. Great analysis there on two very important international stories. Thank you, out of Washington.
Thanks, Bill.
You bet. Sandra, what's next?
ISIS surrendering, the terror army giving up in huge droves as U.S.-backed forces make major gains. What this means for the fight against the Islamic State.
And we are learning a lot more about this killer from Las Vegas. Police again searching the home of Stephen Paddock after speaking with his girlfriend. What new information have they learned about the shooter? But first, Steve Wynn from Fox News Sunday on security in Vegas.
He was a rational man. So was his girlfriend. And yet he prepared over an extended period of time a totally irrational act. Now, this sounds like someone either totally demented or someone who's sending a message.
.23 past Northern California. This is a problem. Overnight, firefighters struggling to get a handle on a raging blaze there in Napa Valley. Flames roaring to life near the Silverado Country Club. Dry conditions fueling that fire. It's torched more than 200 acres. 3 buildings have burned, but they put mandatory evacuations underway at a moment's notice last night. So crews now going door to door, urging people to leave their homes as the winds kick up. We'll keep an eye on that for you today.
We will indeed. Meanwhile, new details in the investigation into the Las Vegas shooting massacre. Police returning to the home of Stephen Paddock after talking to his girlfriend at length. A big question has also been answered. What was on that note that he left, found inside the hotel room where Stephen Paddock was firing from? First responders on 60 Minutes saying it was calculations of wind and trajectory.
I did notice a note on the nightstand near his shooting platform. I could see on it he had written the distance, the elevation he was on, the drop of what his bullet was going to be for the crowd. So he had that written down and figured out, so he would know where to shoot to hit his targets from there. He must have done the calculations or something to figure it out of what his altitude was going to be, on how high up he was, how far out the crowd was going to be, and at that distance, what his drop of his bullet was going to be.
So many questions still. Will Carr is live in Las Vegas. Will, what else have we learned about what happened inside that hotel room on the 32nd floor?
Sandra, well, there was chaos playing out everywhere. That relatively small group of officers raced up to that room on the 32nd floor of Mandalay Bay, and once they got inside the room, they say there were toolboxes, there were power tools, a surveillance system, and guns everywhere. So many, the room looked like an armory.
Shell casings all over the floor. I could smell the gunpowder that had went off in the room. So we were tripping over guns, tripping over long guns inside. There were so many.
Also this weekend, authorities searched Paddock's home here in Nevada for the second time as they continue to question his girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley, and his brother, who lives in Florida, is now in Las Vegas, and he's trying to help them answer what was behind the motive in this massive attack. Sandra.
The tributes that continue to honor the victims in this massacre, what more can you tell us about those?
Well, each day does bring another touching tribute. Last night, every hotel on the Strip dimmed its lights for 11 minutes at the exact time of the shooting 7 days ago. And also, take a listen to Nevada's Lieutenant Governor, who's from Las Vegas, describe this community pulling together.
In our very darkest days, we had our finest hours as a community. Sometimes Las Vegas gets a bad rap for a city that's just about entertainment, really doesn't have a community life to it or a community center. And we've seen ordinary Las Vegans, members of this community coming together, giving blood, giving out blankets, giving food, giving water, providing the comfort to the families of these victims.
Along those lines, a GoFundMe page for the victims and their family members has raised more than $10 million as of this morning. Sandra.
All right, Will Carr in Las Vegas, thank you.
If you saw the 60 Minutes interview last night, I mean, wow, you know, what they found and what he was writing and calculating in that hotel room it's stunning, every piece of information. But if you watch Chris Wallace's interview with Steve Wynn, that was really intriguing to try and figure out how you get inside the mind of a madman who left no breadcrumbs, along the path of his life.
It's interesting to hear him say that would not have happened in one of his hotels. More on that coming up, by the way.
You got it. We should get back to that. Also, the aftermath of Vegas massacre, the NRA making its position clear about laws and Capitol Hill.
There used to be a common decency in this country where people paused from talking about policy. Unfortunately, with Dianne Feinstein and Michael Bloomberg, they want to exploit a tragedy from day one.
So the debate over bump stocks continues. We'll get to that. And why a top Democrat admits that new gun laws would not have changed anything, unfortunately, in Las Vegas.
A big admission there. Plus, Hurricane Nate brings a burst of flooding and power outages to a weary Gulf Coast. We'll have a live report from Mississippi next.
Fox's alert now. Number in New York, Nate reduced to a post-tropical cyclone as it makes its way across the East Coast. This a day after it brought storm surge flooding and power outages as a Cat 1 hurricane to the Gulf Coast. National Weather Service confirming 2 tornadoes as remnants of the storm move across the coast and more. Back in Biloxi, Mississippi, Phil Keating watched it all go down over the weekend. How's the cleanup there, Phil? Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Cleanup mostly done around the coastline in town, but clearly there remains some still left to do. This is the 43-foot sailboat. The owner is actually inside right now trying to salvage everything she can. She's hoping to save the boat. Incidentally, when the Hurricane Nate came ashore with 85-mile-an-hour wind, this boat was tied up at the marina all the way on the other side of the Golden Nugget Hotel, that building in the middle. That's more than a mile that it was pushed and then finally beached right here on the beach. Speaking of the Golden Nugget, when Nate arrived, it brought a storm surge of about 6 feet of water, and inside the first level of the casino and parking garage, this crazy amount of storm surge, and it rose quickly. And also that happened at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino just to the west. A lot of first floor damage. The hotel, the Hard Rock, reopened yesterday afternoon, but certainly some damage. They spent, both casinos spent a lot of time Sunday cleaning everything up, but the casinos proper suffered no damage whatsoever. When the hurricane struck, it came in with ferocity all throughout Saturday night and into Sunday morning. The Category 1 storm slamming, making eye contact with Biloxi, that coastline, and the winds were horizontal. They were punishing, and the rains, about 4 to 6 inches of rain came in, but really, as all of the experts warned over the weekend, it was a Category 1. It's not going to be the wind. It's not going to be the rain. It's going to be the storm surge. And sure enough, that's what happened. But fortunately, most people did heed the warnings, did evacuate from low-lying and flood-prone areas. And in this hurricane, not a single death and no reported injuries at this point, Bill.
That's the best news of all. Thank you, Phil. Phil Keating, live in Biloxi, Mississippi.
We don't believe that bans have ever worked on anything. What we've said has been very clear, that if something transfers a semi-automatic to function like fully automatic, then it ought to regulated differently.
The NRA showing support for regulation of bump stocks, the attachment used by the Las Vegas gunman, which enabled him to fire his weapons faster. But the gun rights group says it's not okay with an outright ban. For more on the renewed gun debate, Lisa Booth, contributor for the Washington Examiner and Fox News contributor. Also here, David Goodfriend, former Hillary for America surrogate and former Deputy Staff Secretary to President Bill Clinton. Thanks to both of you for being here. David, you just heard that from the NRA. Essentially, bans don't work. You are hearing some agreement from Democrats on that. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think the NRA is doing something that what us old Washington hands know is a containment strategy. They know that there's a lot of pressure to do something. And what they've done is chosen something that really could be done at an administrative level by the ATF without an act of Congress, because I believe they think they can get that done. And they're worried about this moving to Congress because they have less control over that. Things could get bigger and bigger, and they don't like that. So that's a tactic that they're using. But I think in your case, when you ask, has a ban ever worked, I'll give you just 3 examples, because they have. The state of Connecticut introduced a much stricter law on assault weapons. The state of Missouri did just the opposite and deaths by guns increased in Missouri and decreased in Connecticut. In Australia, when they had a shooting just like we had.
Weekend. Was there anything, any law, any ban that could have prevented this from happening last Sunday night? She said this.
Could there have been any law passed that would have stopped him?
No. He passed background checks registering for handguns and other weapons on multiple occasions.
Quite an admission on her part, Lisa.
Right, Sandra. And not we do see with these killers that they don't have a history of mental illness. They don't have a criminal history as well. So a background check, even, universal background checks that many Democrats call for, wouldn't have prevented someone like this from getting a gun. And I think that's where the complexity lies with this issue, is because a lot of people want to take a step back and say, why do we want to arbitrarily pass legislation that simply isn't going to stop some of these shootings? And I would encourage people to look at a column or an opinion column in the Washington Post by someone who used to work for 538, and she said she combs, the 33,000 gun deaths, hoping to find that some sort of sweeping legislation would stop this. And what she found is 2/3 of the deaths were suicide related. 1 in 5 had to do with 15 to 34-year-olds basically killing each other. Those deaths were at the hands of one another. And then the last big group were domestic violence cases. So the problem is there's a lot of differences here in the cause of some of these gun deaths in the country. Right. And so passing something sweeping isn't going to stop it.
I'm sorry, if I could just jump in on something Lisa said. She's right. Some gun deaths cannot be prevented. This is very similar to the debate over airbag seatbelts from decades ago, where the argument against putting them into cars was, we're going to save everybody. And that, of course, is true. But just because there's a car accident where the car explodes and the airbag wouldn't have saved anybody.
But what would you have done to have stopped this shooting?
Excuse me. Doesn't mean that all airbags are failures. It really does when you take the aggregate and you look at our country, which has the number of gun deaths per capita in the world.
So, David, let me ask you the question that was asked of Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah.
Is there anything that could have been in the books to prevent this mass shooting from happening?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with the good senator from California. If we had an outright ban on assault weapons, you could not own them. It was illegal without a license. Yes, that man owns several, about a dozen weapons.
Let me tell you what the NRA is saying about that.
I don't like the NRA. I don't trust the NRA. I don't agree with the NRA. I think they're crazy, but that's all right.
How about the ATF? They're pointing fingers at the ATF and saying the ATF needs to do their job. Over the weekend, he said it's illegal to convert a semi-automatic to a fully automatic.
Right.
ATF needs to do its job.
But that's a tactic saying we want to keep this out of Congress because we're afraid of legislation.
No, but it's bigger than guns like AR-15. You can look at studies that show that the bulk of these shootings happen at the hands of handguns. What happened in Virginia Tech? A guy took 2 handguns, killed something like 32 people. I'm from Virginia. I went to the school of Virginia Tech at the time. Here, and Sandra, the problem, too, this isn't a right versus left issue as well. Josh Crawshire with the National Journal has a great column about why this has been such a problem for Democrats, and it's the fact that their party is very split over this issue as well. The 6 Democrats running in rural states have been silent on this issue. The caucus is challenging Dean Heller, and Nevada silent.
Lisa,
This debate rages on. Last word to you.
The fact is Republicans are in control and they own it now. Let's see what they can do. I hope they can do something.
All right, David, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
20 minutes now before the hour. What a weekend for the NFL. Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay Packers do it again. Game line always so dangerous. Cowboys have just scored. Boom. There's the winner right there. Packers trailing final seconds. Aaron Rodgers connecting with Devontae Adams for a touchdown in the win, capping off a 75-yard drive with 1:13 left. This is like a basketball game. I mean, down the field, down the field, down the field, score.
Bill Hemmer in sports. He is out of his chair telling this story.
You know, I was home in Ohio over the weekend, and I got to go to the Bengals game yesterday, and they actually beat the Buffalo Bills. So for me to see my team win at home in person, it's kind of a treat.
I'm sorry.
Oh, and both teams stood for the national anthem.
Very good.
And both teams arms locked. No one kneeled.
Very good. All right. Well, quarterback Colin Kaepernick back in the headlines, this time for something he did not say. Why he's firing back at the false report.
Also, the vice president walking out of an NFL game in Indiana. Why?
Last time he's been to a Colts game was 3 years ago. This looks like a PR stunt to me. He knew our team has had the most players protests. He knew that we were probably going to do it again.
Puerto Rico is still short on supplies 3 weeks now after Hurricane Maria battered the island. And now San Juan's mayor is renewing her war of words with the White House, tweeting this. Increasingly painful to understand the America to help, and U.S. government does not want to help. We need water. FEMA Administrator Brock Long defending his agency's efforts over the weekend.
We filtered out the mayor a long time ago. We don't have time for the political noise. The bottom line is that we are making progress every day in conjunction with the governor.
President Trump also backing FEMA up on Twitter, writing, FEMA and first responders are working hard yet again on Hurricane Nate. Military helping very much under control.
15 before the hour now, the vice president made some news on Sunday, walking out of the Indianapolis Colts game after the national anthem. This after some of the 49ers from San Francisco were kneeling. Pence released this statement. While everyone is entitled to their own opinions, I do not think it's too much to ask the NFL players to respect the flag and our national anthem. I stand with President Trump. I stand with our soldiers, and I will always stand for our flag and our national anthem. I want to bring in Fox News media analyst, Media Buzz, Howie Kurtz, to talk about this. Howie, good Monday to you. President Trump tweeted this earlier. The trip by the vice president was long planned. He's receiving great praise for leaving game after the players showed such disrespect for the country. It is true it was long planned. It is true that Peyton Manning's jersey was going to be retired that day. It is true he was in Las Vegas for a vigil the day before and delivered what, by all accounts, was an emotional, heartfelt speech. It is true that he went out to California after the game. Some are calling this a stunt. When you line all those schedules, I
think it was called from the owner's box. This was a calculated attempt by President Trump to kind of reignite a culture war issue that's played very well for him, even though it's not very popular in most newsrooms. And another tweet by the president made clear that he had asked Mike Pence to do this, and even though he was scheduled to go to the game, it's no secret with his opponent being the San Francisco 49ers, Colin Kaepernick's former team, that there would be some kneeling players, giving the Veep a chance to stage his own.
Well, you don't know if the players are going to kneel that day because the league is changing. 2 weeks ago, most of them reversed course. They found a resolution. They lock arm and for the national anthem. And if you're going to retire the jersey, if the trip is planned weeks in advance, how can we consider this a call from the owner's box?
Well, I would first of all, the president says he asked the vice president to do it if the players kneel. Now, I would just say there was perhaps a high likelihood that at least a few players would kneel. It was actually more than that. And either way, from the administration's point of view, if nobody kneels, then Mike Pence gets to enjoy a game with his home state team. And if there is a kneeling and he feels the need to walk out, then they've got the issue. And it's an issue the media love, and it revives the issue.
You're calling this a win-win. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying politically, because it's a very divisive issue, and a lot of people feel that they have a right to protest, but it's something that has played well politically, and Mike Pence is a very loyal number 2, and if the president wanted him to do this, he was happy to accommodate. I'm not saying he doesn't truly believe it in his heart, but certainly he gave himself the opportunity to stage that walk.
Interesting how the networks are airing the national anthem now for every broadcast. I mean, it's become a news event, not just a sports event.
Yeah, before the first ball is snapped.
Quickly, this CBS story about what Colin Kaepernick said or did not say, this was the response from the ex-49ers. A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get his pants on. That from Winston Churchill. He was reacting to a story from CBS Sports, right? A fellow by the name of Jason Lancanfora, I think I got that name right. He says, I wanted to clarify one thing regarding Kaepernick. When I was asked about whether whether or not he would sit or stand for the anthem, Colin would have to address any future demonstrations. I did not ask him if he would sit or stand. Our chat primarily about his will to play. All that followed a reporting from CBS, right? That suggests Kaepernick would stand if an NFL team would hire him.
Yeah, look.
That right.
This was not a clarification. This was a major league fumble. It was a big-time mistake. He had interviewed Kaepernick. He hadn't even asked Kaepernick this question. He goes on CBS and says, well, if a team picks up Kaepernick, he will stand next time. Why he wanted to do that, I don't know. But if an out-of-work quarterback is quoting Winston Churchill in knocking down your story, Bill, you have a problem.
You might. But how was CBS handled this, do you think?
I think CBS should have run a more full-throated correction. A former professional football player was quoted as saying something that he did not say. It's not a question of shades of meaning. He wasn't even asked the question, and it's the kind of mistake that undermines the credibility of the media, including the sports media.
Kaepernick's girlfriend, the reports that Colin will stand for the anthem are completely false. He's never discussed this with anyone. Apparently that's the case in the end. Thank you, Howie. Good to see you on a Monday. Howard Kurtz in Washington.
Well, he was once part of Hollywood's elite. Now movie mogul Harvey Weinstein is out of a job, and his former production company is looking for a new name.
Also, President Trump once again reaching out to Democrats, this time maybe on a deal over health care. He said yesterday he's willing to accept a short-term agreement. Have a listen.
No, we can make a temporary deal because ultimately we're going to have it back to the states. We're going to block grant back to the states. But if we made a temporary deal, I think it would be a great thing for people.